So as we get started with today's video, I definitely need to lay out a few disclaimers before we start, because this is the internet and people are always willing to try to catch you in a word that you misspoke or find some way to immediately discredit you. So we have to start off with a few disclaimers. That way hopefully I can at least preemptively stop the people from getting mad at me. So the first disclaimer that we're going to have here is that I don't actually hate Smogon as a system. I think that generally it does a fairly good job of making a balanced, playable metagame. And I think that they, in a lot of ways, actually end up making smarter decisions than Game Freak themselves, especially with Dynamax and then this new Terrestrial system that looks pretty busted. I can appreciate that they are trying to make a healthy 6v6 singles metagame, and that we have so many other inventive and creative metagames that come out. So I like Smogon as a system. This is not me trying to tear down Smogon, but this is me saying that things in Smogon could be better. They could be changed, and I don't like how they currently work, and here are the reasons why. So you don't need to worry. This isn't me trying to immediately just tear down Smogon as an institution. Rather, just me saying, hey, I don't like this. The second one, and this is probably the biggest disclaimer that needs to be said, I'm speaking here not as somebody who has a ton of experience working inside of Smogon, or inside of tournament play even. I'm speaking more as an outside spectator. I have been playing competitive Pokemon at, any kind of level since at least X and Y, and I wasn't good in X and Y, so I haven't, been playing for a ton of time, but I have been around for some time, almost the better part of a decade, and at some level or another, I've experienced multiple bans, multiple new games, and I've sort of seen how these things cycle, and I have some memory of certain events. That being said, I don't have perfect knowledge of how things work, and as we'll see today, there are many things that I'll be ignorant of. So if I'm ignorant of something, then you can inform me in the comments, and I'll be glad to learn something new. But that being said, just because I'm not aware of something doesn't immediately discredit or invalidate what I say. If anything, that just says the Smogon is failing to advertise or fully publicize what criticisms I have to talk about, right? If I'm saying something, you say, well, no, but we have this. Well, how come I didn't know that, right? It's not like I've not just heard about the system last week, right? It seems like I should have known about this by this point. So just keep that in mind, that if there is something that I've missed, well, that's great. Maybe that'll help with the problem I'm griping about. But if this is something that I'm not aware of, and I'd like to think that I sort of understand what's going on, then that means that Smogon really is not doing a good job of explaining things, in my opinion. Alright, the third point is I don't want to attack anybody here. If I name anybody's name personally, it's because they're one of the few people I actually recognize in the community. Generally, I don't actually even know the people behind the names most of the time. And unless you have some major meltdown in a major tournament, like one specific player that I can think of, then for the most part, I don't really care who you are or what you've done, because I don't even remember which player you are, especially if you're one of those weird players with the 3 letters in your name and that's all your name is, then I have no clue who you are. Alright, number 4, finally, is I am going to try to come up with solutions when I can come up with them. For some of these, I have no clue how to fix them, but, for some of them, I've given it some thought, and I think I have some ideas. That being said, I'm not saying that these ideas aren't without their flaws, and I'm also not going to say that there aren't other solutions out there. It's just whatever I come up with off the top of my head, okay? So with that out of the way, I think that's enough disclaimers so we can actually get into the meat and potatoes of this video. So there are quite a few reasons why I am dissatisfied with the way that Smogon does their banning policy and their tiering policy in general. And the first thing that I don't like about it is that only a small group of people get to decide when or how a Pokemon gets suspected or gets banned, right? You got the tier leader, you got the council members on that, that work for that tier, and they sort of get together with some regularity, I don't know how often, We probably just hang out in a Discord call and then eventually make some decision. I don't know. And they're the ones that get to decide if we're going to quick ban them on after drops, right? Oh, look, Guzzlord got dropped appeal. Now we're going to quick ban it. Or whatever. That's just one of the more recent ones. I think Guzzlord got quick banned. If it didn't, well, just fill in with another different Pokemon. It doesn't matter. If we want to suspect them on because we think it's broken, then let's test it, right? We're going to test Calyrex Shadow Rider because it's broken. How did that come to pass? Was it the tier leader who decided that? Was it the community was griping enough to the tier leader? Was it the community held a poll as to whether they should have a suspect? I don't know. I'm guessing it was probably just the community leaders, and they may have heard from some people, but just because enough people talked to them didn't mean that there was actually some kind of onus on them to do anything about it. It was just if they felt like it, they heard enough complaints, then they would have a suspect test. There's no real regularity to these things. Similarly, with suspecting back into a tier, maybe I want to suspect and see if Galarian Darmanitan is okay in the OU tier now, because we have enough choice Scarfers and bulky defensive Pokemon, and the metagame is in a stable enough position now where maybe we could try to test back in Galarian Darmanitan. I'm not suggesting we should, I'm just saying as an example. Well, who gets to decide that? Well, I don't get to decide that. I don't get to say, hey, could we have a metagame ladder where we have Darmanitan back in the tier and I can try it out and see if I like it? No, it's only the people in charge, and they get to go tell the people at Showdown to make a ladder for it or whatever. I don't know how that works. So this is sort of annoying for multiple reasons. First of all, as a random community member, my voice doesn't really mean much, and maybe it shouldn't because I don't know what I'm talking about half the time. But it also means that I don't, if I feel strongly about something, I'm going to feel like I'm talking into the void because nobody hears my complaints about the current state of the metagame as to whether I think something should get banned, shouldn't get banned, or needs to get resuspected back in. And that can be frustrating for people who feel disenfranchised. Another big thing that's problematic with giving only a few people free reign to choose how the tier gets shaped is that they have their own personal biases. Now, these players are all quite good, I'm sure, and are familiar with playing multiple play styles and whatnot, but they are going to have inherent biases built into them based off how they prefer to play, how they think the metagame should look, and those biases are going to be put onto the way that the suspects happen and which Pokemon can get suspected. So I'm sure that these council members all really have good intentions at heart, and they're trying their best to be unbiased and fair to the Pokemon and to the players. And I'm no way suggesting that these people are acting maliciously or that they're incompetent, because I haven't really seen too much evidence of it, other than, whatever you could expect from a normal human being who makes mistakes. But what I am saying is that when you have a system that allows just a few members of a community to make decisions that impact everybody and how they can have an enjoyment with the game, then that is going to open you up to people who question your motives. The people who say, oh, well, Finchinator just doesn't deal well with Kyurem, so he's going to suspect it now. But he has no problem with Toxapex, so he's never going to ban that, lol. Right? I don't think that's necessarily the case. But if people want to say that because it fits their narrative or their preconceived biases, well, then that's going to be something that you are leaving yourself open to, because you only have a few people who basically can just make decisions and have no real way. They don't answer to the community. We didn't vote these people into office. They just sort of happened one day. And so if we don't like them, how do we get rid of them? We can't. I guess we, harass them on Twitter. Maybe that's the only way. Okay. My lawyer says I should say I was joking, and please don't harass anybody. All right. How do we fix this? I don't know. But frankly, this is the one I have no clue how to fix this. Don't see a world where we just have a direct democracy on allowing people to get things suspected in or out of tiers. No, I think we're going to have council members. I think we're going to have tier leaders. That's just going to have to be a fact of the matter. I don't see any way of fixing that, unfortunately. But let's just keep that in the back of our head. Okay. The second point I want to talk about is apparently there are surveys, and these surveys will go out periodically, and then you can say, hey, I like the way the metagame looks, and here are my thoughts about the metagame, and do I think this mod is broken, yes or no? So that's cool. Then the tier leaders and the council members, they can take those surveys into consideration. That's a good way for them to get feedback from the community, and they can find out what people think is ban-worthy or not. If a lot of people say, hey, this is ban-worthy, well then yeah, that would be a great way to decide to suspect something, right? That's not just necessarily based on my own personal playing experience. So that's good. But first of all, let's talk about this. The tier leaders, they take those surveys into consideration. They don't actually have to do anything based off those surveys. You could get back 100 out of 100 surveys that says Clefable in Isle of Armor is busted and needs to go. But if you say, well, you know, it's only going to be like a month or two left, and then we're going to get the Crown Tundra, so we're just going to leave Clefable there. Well, good. You considered my survey, and now we're moving on. And my survey had no real impact on the metagame, nor did it fix my problems with the metagame, right? So there's no actual consequences for the tier leaders of listening to the people in the survey or not. And these surveys aren't made public, which I think probably is a good thing. But at the very least, there's no accountability for the tier leaders actually following up on these surveys or not. So if I don't feel like I'm being listened to, then it can be frustrating for me to see a survey come out and say, hey, we care about the community. But then I don't feel like you're listening to me when I do give you surveys, so I'm not going to answer the next one. Right? And then let's also look at this survey. So I have this survey pulled up here. This is the most recent one in July, I believe. And we have to look at this. We can say, okay, what is the Smogon username? That's fine. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you enjoy the current metagame? That's fine. How good do you find the current metagame? Do you find it competitive? That's a good, relevant question that is different from this one, so I don't mind that. And then they ask for a bunch of Pokemon. How do you feel about Melmetal? How do you feel about Weavile, Heatran, Kartana, Magnezone? And I guess those are the ones maybe they personally find the most busted, or that they feel that the community's been complaining about the most. I don't mind having specific Pokemon listed there. Then here, they have a box for any mons they may have missed. I think that's a great thing there. I think it would be nice to maybe have a second box here to explain why you think something's busted, but maybe the council members don't have time to look through 2,000 people's, verbose answers as to why they think that the Tapu Lele is busted, right? And then we've got any comments, suggestions, concerns, a little bit open-ended, but sure, we'll leave that box there. Then let's get down to here to the bottom, where it says, hey, are you a good player? Do you know what you're doing? Should I have to listen to what you're saying? No? Okay, well then I'll just throw your answer in the trash. Right? That's what this is saying. This is saying if you haven't gotten to the top of the ladder, the very tippy top, and if you haven't played in a major tournament game, well, why should I care about what you have to say? Now, to a certain extent, I understand this. Because if you stay in the 1300s on the OU ladder, well then you have not seen the OU ladder, right? You haven't seen anything beyond the bottom of the ladder where people bring their meme teams and their Ash Ketchum teams and their Cynthia teams and their weird fake stall and whatever other things. And those are fun. And I personally love the bottom of the ladder. I think it's a great time down there. But you haven't seen the OU ladder. So how the heck are you supposed to actually actively contribute to a discussion on the metagame when you don't even know what that metagame looks like? And you don't know how to play in it. So I can understand having this here, but you can see at the same time, I hope, how this could be viewed sort of as a gatekeepy kind of thing here. is a message that says, hey, are you good? No? Okay, then I don't care. So that's a bit unfortunate in my opinion. I don't think that was their intent. I'm not going to ascribe a motive, but you have to also look at it as to how people are going to perceive that. Now, not everybody will perceive it that way, but especially if you're somebody who either already has a chip on their shoulder against Smogon, or somebody who maybe suffers from social anxiety, or depression or whatever, then there are many kinds of personalities that would look at that and say, well, they're not going to listen to what I have to say, or I'm not worthy of contributing to this discussion, and I guess I'm just not going to bother responding because, well, I don't want to take the time to actively give a meaningful response to this if they're just going to look and be like, oh, it's a 1400s player, whatever, man. Well, let's look at the real players. Oh, I recognize this guy's name. Yeah, he's good. Let's listen to what he has to say. Right? So you're not going to get meaningful input from a good portion of the metagame. Or not of the metagame. A good portion of the community. Sorry, I misspoke. Let's go over now, how are these advertised? So I said at the beginning here that apparently there are surveys. Well, I knew that there were surveys because I've heard YouTubers talk about them. There are at least a couple of YouTubers that do sometimes advertise when these surveys come out, but that's literally the only way I ever know that these things are coming out. So how would you advertise that these surveys are coming out? Well, there are two ways that seem like the best option to me, because unless I'm going to follow you on Twitter, which I'm not going to follow Smogon.com on or Smogon University, whatever they're called, on Twitter. That's not going to happen. So there's two main ways. First of all, you've got Showdown. So we got Showdown here, and in the middle column, we have this news box. Now, the news box I have gripes with on my own. This could be a whole video unto itself, but just for sake of brevity, let's talk about a few things I have problems with this news box. First of all, it always pops up here in the middle, and it always has something in it. These messages are always the same color. They don't have any kind of tagging system, so I don't know how to filter. I can't filter them, really, and I can't even visually filter them. If the important messages would come up with a different color, maybe it's in red, then I would take note and be like, oh, this is different. Maybe this is something important. I should look into it. But I don't even know if they put the community surveys up on this. I'm assuming maybe they do. But if they have, I've never seen it because I always filter this middle column out. So even if they do, and I don't even know if they do, but even if they did, I would just filter it out because that would be white noise to me. This middle column, I never look at it, except for maybe the first of the month so I can know what the OM is. And maybe they'll have the quick links. That's about it. I don't even know if they do that anymore. Another gripe I have with the news column while we're here is that I can't look anywhere past the first two here. And so this Smogon Champions League 2 player signups doesn't apply to me. I don't care about that. I don't even know what the heck this is. So I'm going to skip that. And Pokemon Games 25th Community Playthrough. I really couldn't care less about that. So this doesn't tell me if there are any active suspect tests going on. This doesn't tell me if there are any community feedback options that I can have. This doesn't tell me about any active ongoing tournaments with games I can watch. There are so many things that you could put in this middle section that would actually be useful information to the people. But right now we're talking about a tournament that I don't know if that's cool. I don't know if it's even available to me as an average player. And then we're talking about some stupid community playthrough that really doesn't do anything for me. So, although I'm sure one or two people maybe care about that, the majority of people do not. And so this is just going to become white noise. That's one of the only places I can think that you could effectively communicate that there was a community survey going on. And you completely wasted it. The other place that you would, I'm assuming, advertise this is on the Smog forums. So the Smogon forums are woefully outdated and almost impossible to navigate. It's all these arcane sub-forums, and you don't know where do I go if there's a bug for Showdown? Competitive play? Maybe? Is it in suggestions? And you always have to go back and think about it. I actually think that might have been where it is. But you always have to guess. Where did they hide this thing? And there's nothing at the top that percolates that says, these are the most important things coming out of this thread. So if you're not in that thread, you don't even know what's in the thread. So how do I find the OU community feedback survey? Well, you're going to have to go to Smogon Metagames, or you can go to Overused directly. So let's go to Smogon Metagames just to show how it's done. And then you go to Overused, and that'll take you to where all the things that are overused are talked about. And then once you get to here, then the things at the top don't actually necessarily pertain to anything that's most important, although sometimes they do. So then we say, is there a survey? Go down. Did I miss it? Oh, here it is. OU Council Minutes and Surveys. That doesn't really sound like something that's for the community to give feedback, but it does say survey, so I guess I'll click it. All right. And then this one here. Does this one have the survey in it? Oh, look, here we are. Here's a survey. Well, thank goodness they made this here button real nice and big. And so then you click on it, and then you get to the tiering survey from there. So that's how that's done. Now, you'll excuse me for assuming this, but the average player on Smogon or on Showdown probably doesn't understand how to do that. They're lucky if they can find the calculator and the place where they have all of the move sets, right? In that cool Pokedex that they've got over there that isn't updated. So that's the best that most people are getting to. So if you want the average person to have their option to give feedback, and you're hiding it all the way down here, and it's really hard for anybody to find it, well then, yeah, people are going to get frustrated when they feel like that the what I want to say, that the bans and the suspects and the way the tiering is done doesn't involve them at all, and it only involves really the whims of the tier leaders and council members. Many of them may not even be aware that this survey thing is an option. So if you were to do a better job of advertising it and doing a better job of being player friendly, of saying, hey, we value everybody's opinion and here's how you go about doing it and getting the word out, then people would maybe feel more enfranchised, feel like this is more of a community effort where we can all come together. And then you, of course, also have to have council members that are good at communicating their thoughts on the feedback. But that's an entirely different can of worms. We've already spent a bit too long on this point, so I'm going to move on to my third point. Although I guess that was sort of the first point, part two. The next point I want to talk about is that a lot of times people are going to do the tiering, right? The bans, the unbans, the suspect tests, based more on tournament play rather than the ladder play. Now, I'm playing on the ladder 99% of the time, even as a competitive tournament player, right? You're not playing in tournaments every single day. You're playing on the ladder most of the day. So it seems like that when I'm creating a metagame, I should be focusing more so on the ladder and less so on the tournaments. Now, of course, tournaments, you do want them to be fair, and you want them to be competitive, and you want them to be based on player skill rather than luck, or on having an unbeatable matchup. And I can understand that. And this is obviously going to come down to a matter of philosophy. But I do think that dismissing what people have to say about how this plays on the ladder, just because, well, no, that's how the ladder plays, but in tournaments, this is how it plays. Great, but I don't care about tournaments as a person who never plays in tournaments. And so y'all can jump off a cliff for all I care. And even the tournament players, most of the time, are playing on the ladder, and if it's not a problem on the ladder, then it's not a problem on the ladder. Right? A lot of these Pokemon that end up getting suspect tested and or banned don't even have high usage in the tier they're getting banned in. Because most of the time, it's only a problem when you get into tournament play. Although some of the time, it's because you have weird baton pass spikes HO, and then all of a sudden, Necrozma Espeon rises up in usage to the top of the tier, and you're like, what happened here? But aside from that, most of the time, when things are getting banned and it doesn't have high usage, it's not because they're necessarily broken on the ladder play. In fact, a lot of times in the ladder, they're not even that good. It's because in tournament play, specifically and only in tournament play, they're busted. Great. Well, I can appreciate that, and I'm not going to dismiss that either, because I do think it's important to have good tournament play. And a lot of times the Pokemon that are unhealthy in tournament play can also lead to unhealthy ladder play. So I do think there's some crossover, but you're completely discrediting what people are playing almost all the time, if not all the time, to benefit a few people who are going to occasionally play a tournament game, which I don't personally believe is the correct approach. Now, on the subject of tournaments, while we're talking about tournaments, there's a reason why these 100 plus games that take multiple hours and people have children and die during the games, why that's a meme for Smogon, right? The tournaments are taking, the games are sometimes unwatchable as we sit and watch Clefable and Toxapex waste each other's PP. And I can appreciate having a balanced metagame, and I think it's great that those players are having fun, but nobody wants to watch that. And if you want people to actually care about your competition, then you should have people show up to watch the competition, aside from the 50 or so people that, actively trawl the Smogon forums all day. Because if you want to get 2,000 people watching or 20,000 people watching, like we have for Smash Bros. Or any other major tournament, then you're going to need to make a product that is watchable and that can compete with VGC, that can compete with any other competitive Pokemon leagues that want to come out in the future and compete with Smogon, which I'm sure eventually there will be one. And you're going to have to compete with those. And you need to make a watchable product. So if I'm going to ban everything that's offensively powerful in the tournaments, just because, that Pokemon is scary in the tournaments, well, then you're going to just get a bunch of fat in the tournaments, and nobody wants to watch that. So again, I'm not a tournament player, and I don't necessarily know what goes into making a good tournament game. What I do know is that something is wrong, because I don't want to watch 800 turn games. That's not really something that I think is personally fun. And I'm not just talking about GSC, I'm talking about Gen 8. So if we're banning things based off of the tournaments, and that's still not working to make good tournament games, maybe we could just stick to banning things based off how they play on the ladder. I don't know. That's a bit of a hot take, but I'm going to stick with it. Let's quickly pull up a actual thread on a suspect test that happened recently. And this suspect test is the Vanillix suspect test. And this isn't me singling this out because I particularly agree or disagree with the Vanillix suspect test. I actually have no problem with banning Vanillix personally. I perused the thread and I found some of the arguments quite compelling, and so I have no problem with Vanillix getting banned or not banned. I don't have a horse in that race. I barely ever play PU, and I don't really care about Vanillix as a Pokemon. So y'all can ban it or not. I don't care. It was banned, FYI. So I'm not here to attack this particular ban. I'm just here because it was the most recent one. So I'm just pulling a recent one that I remembered happened. And let's look through what happened here. So the first thing we have is the suspect reasoning. The PU Council has decided to suspect test Vanillix. And they go on to sell you on why Vanillix is broken. Vanillix is the premier breaker in PU right now. It has virtually no reliable switch-ins. They're going to tell you why all of the checks to it are either bad checks or are extremely restrictive. Its constraint on the team builder cannot and should not be understated. So clearly, the person who wrote this, which is the PU peer leader, is not making any pretense of being unbiased. And they'll actually go on and they make other posts down below, and they clearly are in favor of banning Vanillix. Obviously, the tier leader is going to be having their own opinion on this, but I do think it's interesting. They just come out, guns blazing. I'm going to tell you my opinion, and this is the way you should vote, basically, is what they're saying. So that's going to set the tone of the conversation. Now, people are going to come down here and they're going to give their opinions on whether to ban or to unban this person. Again, the tier leader they're going to come back and say, oh yes, this was a good post. And then they're going to give more of their own personal opinions, which is fine. I don't have a problem with this. Then they're going to go on to make fun of people who have an opinion that they don't share. So that's great. I thought this was a particularly snarky line. I don't think that was becoming of a tier leader, but that's just me. And then this is their personal plea, which is fine. And this I do agree with. If you have to run a Gigalith on every team just to avoid dying to Vanillix, I do think that is something that indicates something unhealthy in the metagame. So that's not a problem. But this is sort of offensive. And this person here sort of says that too. And then of course people have problems with what this person says. In any case, I sort of just skimmed through some of this as I was thinking about my thoughts for this video earlier. People went through here. I saw, oh yeah, this was fun. Some people were going back and forth attacking each other. And then, where was it? I think it's really funny that when people say stuff really strongly, and then at the end they say, hopefully I didn't offend anybody, even though they said some things that definitely could offend people. So that's fun. So this is the kind of thread you have to be prepared to delve into if you're going to take an active participatory role in the suspect test. Right, of course, technically you can always go get your X. You don't actually have to read any of this stuff. But if you want to contribute to the conversation and maybe try to influence how people are thinking, then you're going to have to wade through all of this, which is unfortunate. Yeah, I can agree with this sentiment to an extent, and other people have echoed that sentiment. This person here says that they decided that these people had uncompelling evidence, and they wanted to vote no ban, and they're entitled to their opinion. And then later on, people are going to go back and say, hey, your thoughts on what I said were bad or illogical, and let me tell you why. And that's fine. That's how discussion and debate is held. But at the same time, if you're somebody who doesn't like to have their well-constructed, or at least in their minds, well-constructed, well-thought-out criticisms or contribution immediately shot down by somebody who already had their mind made up, then, you know, if I say, oh, I think that Wish, Toxic, Vaporeon, or Flareon can actually counter Vanillix, you can say, oh, well, no, Flareon's a bad Pokemon in the tier, right? And maybe it is. I don't personally know. I think I used that Flareon before, so, and I don't remember how well it did, but and maybe it's a bad Pokemon. I don't know, but if that's something that I think could work, then maybe it could, and maybe if you gave it enough time in the tier, people would find other solutions to it. I don't know, but I will say this is Pokemon. Not everything is mathematical and clear cut out as people want it to make, and so people are sharing their thoughts here, and they make it seem really just one way is the right way, and that's my way. I don't really like that, right? Spit numbers, do your math, that's fine. I have no problem with having the numbers support your statements. But so many people in here, on both sides of the argument, both the pro-ban and anti-ban, use numbers to try to categorically say, this is how Pokemon should be played, and this is why my argument is correct. And I just don't buy into that personally. So I'm not really a fan of the way that suspect tests happen in terms of the politics of it. I prefer to have things a little more calm. When we're discussing things, I'm a little less confrontational. I am a timid Ralts after all, and there's a reason why I try to stay away from those threads as much as possible. These people get so mad at each other. Alright, now the next one is that only people with the skill or the time or the energy to get the Rex can vote. So the required GXE or whatever Rex stands for basically says you have to play a certain number of games and you have to win a certain amount of times out of those games to be able to be allowed to vote, to have your opinion count at all. And it's not an insignificant number of games either. It's like 30 or 40. Depending on how good you are, I think sometimes you can skip a few games or whatever, but then you'd have to be really good, right? And I can appreciate the idea of, we don't want random people spamming votes, right? Having the rec system is a really great way of preventing botting, I think, hopefully. We haven't had it happen yet, as far as I know. So preventing botting in a manipulation of voting, I think that's a fantastic way of doing it. I think it's also great because it sort of keeps it to people who actually know what they're talking about the metagame, and not people who played 10 games on the ladder and think they know how the metagame works. That's also really good. I can definitely appreciate that. But I think we should care about people who only play a metagame occasionally, especially for lower tiers. Generally, you don't have quite as many of those, although you do have some. OU is going to be one where you can have a lot of people who just log on, play a few games of OU now and again, and they haven't kept up with the minutia of the metagame, right? If I don't know what the optimal set is for Dragapult at the moment, I'll be forgiven for running a Choice Specs Dragapult when Dragon Dance is currently, the best set in the metagame. But that's just ladder play. If I want to, if I hear a certain Pokemon is getting banned or getting suspected, maybe I'll have an opinion on that. And I believe those people should have their opinion listened to and heard and counted, because this is Pokemon. This is a community effort, and we're trying to make a fun game where everybody can enjoy and contribute to the way the metagame is played, not just a few people who actually think they know what they're doing. And so we allow everybody in politics to vote. Every single person of adult age in the United States, more or less, can vote. And that's something that actually matters. Now we're playing Pokemon, which literally does not matter in any way, shape, or form. And we're only restricting it to a few people who can vote. So this one, I think, is actually somewhat easy to fix, in my opinion. And maybe this would open up a new can of worms, but the system I wanted to come up with is more akin to a sweepstakes from a cereal box, where it says no purchase necessary. So in those, as far as I understand how they work, if you buy one box of cereal, you have one vote or one entry. If you buy 100 boxes of cereal, you have 100 entries, right? So if you want to increase your chances of winning a sweepstakes, you just have to buy more. Same with the Monopoly thing that McDonald's puts out, right? Every time you get more Monopoly pieces, you have more chances of winning things. But they always say no purchase necessary because that's the law. Now, how do you have to go about getting an entry? You have to do a postcard and wait 3 to 6 weeks, and then maybe potentially they've entered you into these sweepstakes. Do the same kind of thing. So if I go on and get GXC and get Rex and whatever else I need to do, right, with a certain number of games, and I post it to the Smog forums in the place where you've hidden the data away, then I get to get one vote, just as per normal. But everybody else who doesn't get to do that should, in my opinion, also be allowed to vote. Maybe I'm somebody who's an 1100s player, but I see that you're having a suspect test to ban Spectrier from OU, and I think, I like Spectrier, I think he's really fun to use, and I want to keep him around. Is that a good idea? Probably not. But that's my opinion anyway. And so I'm going to be able to click a button on the Showdown homepage that takes me to wherever you're collecting and aggregating these votes. And I don't know how you do it in the best way, but you do that. And then you take the total number of votes and you just weight it, right? The people in that section, in that pool, can get 10% of the vote. And the 90% goes to the GXC. The overwhelming preponderance of people on the ladder are not going to get GXC, but if they want to, they can vote in this other one. Their vote will be 10,000th of 10% out of this vote. It will not make any lick of difference in the end, except for maybe on highly contested suspects. But for the most part, it's not going to do anything. And then at least you've enfranchised to some trifling amount the people that don't have the time, energy, or skill to make it high up enough to get Rex. Okay, this is somewhat patronizing, if anything, because it does sort of give people a lollipop and expect them to shut up and be quiet now. Because your vote doesn't really matter. You could also make it, of course, that everybody gets one vote who gets Rex, and everybody who doesn't get Rex only gets 1/100th of a vote. And then it wouldn't be just 10%. If it was a very popular suspect test, then maybe that could get a more of a percentage, and that actually would be a bit more powerful, because 1/100th of a vote can add up. The other main problem I have with this idea is that this one would allow for botting, and I don't know how you do bot prevention, but I'm not a computer scientist by trade, so let those people and the IT people figure out how to prevent botting. That's not my job. My job is just a way to say, hey, we want people to have a way to participate in voting, even if they don't have, the 20 hours or the 10 hours or however many hours it'll take them personally to get enough Rex, right? Maybe I'm just barely able to get Rex if I try really hard with a really good team, and I should be allowed to vote if I earn it. But if I'm one of those people that it's going to take me multiple accounts or however it works, I don't even know if that's allowed. But if it takes me a long time to get that for whatever reason, then that's a lot of investment just for one suspect test. And it would be nice to give people the option to say, hey, we've heard your voice, we care about your opinion, even if you don't have the ability to get this for whatever reason. And there's just one nice little button, you can click it, and now your voice is being part of the community. I think that would be a good thing to do, personally. Another big one, and this is actually one of my major gripes with the way the banning and the tiering works in Smogon, and that is that banned Pokemon, they often become immediately irrelevant. As soon as you ban them, those Pokemon, they never see competitive play ever again. So let's look at Showdown, and we'll pull up the tiers. So let's look at the UUBL, and see how many of these Pokemon see regular OU play. Because they can't be used in UU, they can only be used in OU and above. Aegislash, Alakazam, no, not really. Arctozolt, sometimes on Hail teams, and that's about it. Blaziken, no. Dracozolt, no. Gengar, not really. Holucha, rarely nowadays. Como, I feel like I've seen a little bit, but not particularly. The Lottie Twins, no. Mienshao is really bad in OU, in my opinion. That was my first OU live on this channel was with Mienshao. Terrakion likewise struggles for basically the same reasons. Moltres actually isn't too bad, and that's probably the one that, in my opinion, in my experience, has seen the most usage. And Thundurus, you never see that one. So these Pokemon, for the most part, aren't going to be seeing any playtime in OU, or at least any meaningful playtime in OU, because most of them are being outclassed, right? Gengar, I would just rather use Dragapult. Holucha just gets hazed by Toxapex or whatever else. The Lottie Twins, might as well just use Dragapult. Any fighting type, might as well just use Urshifu. Most of these guys just have something. Alakazam, might as well use Tapu Lele. And so they're getting outclassed. So you never see those Pokemon. And Pokemon is a character-based game. People are trained by the Pokemon Company, by Game Freak, to fall in love with. These Pokemon have personal attachments to them. So when these Pokemon get banned and they're no longer usable in the tier that they like to play, or they're just not good in the tier that they ended up in, then you can dang well expect people to get upset when these Pokemon that they love, they can't play with them anymore. And you could be like, oh, go play with them on Anything Goes. And if you have to tell people to go play on Anything Goes, well, now you know you screwed up, because that's a meme tier, right? That's for the memers. That's not for people who actually want to play a serious game. RUBL is one of the most egregious in my example. You never see Haxorus, Durant, Scolipede. Scolipede always ends up in a banned list. It never gets to get in a real tier, in my experience at least. It always ends up in UUBL or this generation in RUBL, and it never sees any usage in OU because there's always Zapdos, there's always a few other mons like that always invalidate it. This gen, it actually fell down beyond UU to RU, and you would think, oh, well, now in RU it's going to get playtime. No, it's not, because in RU it's busted, apparently. I don't play enough RU to know exactly why it's busted, but I'll take your word for it. And most of these Pokemon never see any meaningful playtime in UU. Maybe Necrozma or Obstacle? I don't even know. Most of these you never see. And for good reason, right? Mandibuzz is in the tier. It's going to shred Haxorus. Scolipede is great for a number of reasons that you can see here in the tier. Skarmory being one of the main ones. And so, if I want to use those Pokemon, the tier that they can be played in, they're bad. They're bad. And so I can't play with those guys. If you want to see the worst one, because we can play that game with the lower tiers all day. But if you want to see the worst one, let's go to the Ubers tier. So the Ubers tier has about 15 viable Pokemon, and the rest are trash. You can't use any of them. To say nothing of the different forms for like Genesect. You're never going to see those forms of Genesect for the most part. But most of these Pokemon, not usable. So to make it so that I'm not completely making stuff up, let's look at the usage stats. So these are the usage stats for Ubers, as of most recently, I believe. Now we can see Yveltal has a nice and healthy 49% usage. And I don't remember what the difference is between Raw and Rio, so I'm just going to look at this one on the left here, and we're just going to take that as what to look at. If it's not exactly correct, well, you'll forgive me, and we can just pretend like it is. Then let's look at some of the other Uber tier Pokemon, right? We've got Dialga down here at number 35 with 3.8% usage. That's barely good enough to stick around in a tier. Then you've got Kyurem Black with under 3% usage. That's not looking too great. You got Kyurem White with even less, 2.5%. And that Pokemon never gets to be OU. What the heck? We've come down a bit more, and we've got Giratina down here. Giratina with a 1.3% usage. Solgaleo is really sad. That's got 1% usage. So we've got Pokemon that have 1% usage, but they can't get out of the tier they're in. They never can fall out. So you'll never ever get to use these Pokemon in any real capacity. Of course, you can meme with them, but if you want to actually play with them and see success, they can't see success, and there's reasons for it. Let's go over here. This here is the higher tier Ubers, right? So those the previous numbers we were looking at were only the good players. Now we're going to look at the previous numbers were all the players. Now we're only going to look at the good players. That's what I meant to say. Only the good players, 80% usage with Yveltal. So 80% of the teams in Ubers have Yveltal. And we all know the reason why Yveltal is number 1. It's because of number 2 and number 4. And I guess to a lesser extent number 3. So that doesn't seem great to me. Personally, I think that Calyrex probably should have gotten banned for that very reason. I don't think that 80% usage on Yveltal is indicative of a good metagame. But let's look at some of the other Pokemon and see where they ended up. Kyurem Black down to 1.7% usage. Nice. We've got Kyurem White down here with less than 1% and less usage than Xatu and Barraskewda for whatever reason. We've got Dugtrio here with 1% usage. You can only use Dugtrio to any effect in Ubers because Arena Trap is banned. We've got Cinderace here, who's been banned to Ubers with less than 2%. Shedinja has higher usage in the Ubers tier, where 95% of the Pokemon either have super effective moves, set sand, or have moves that ignore abilities. So that's not a good look, and that's among the high tier. Remember, we're looking at the high tier players, not the low tier players. But yeah, Kyurem Black is competing for a move slot with Frostlass. That should say something right there. Okay, let's keep going down. Necrozma Dawn Wings has played in 2,300 games in the high ladder. Spectrier. Spectrier has the same usage as Glalie, more or less. That's unfortunate. And I'm sure there's at least one more below Spectrier. I think Spectrier might be that low just because was it banned in July to Ubers? And if that's the case, then you can ignore that one. But I'm sure that's not going to change by too much. Reshiram is down here with Abacoko and Umbreon, so I guess that's okay company to be keeping. Oh yes, I thought this one was particularly sad. You can look into Crow's Dawn Wings and see the Jinx has higher usage. I don't even know how that happens. And Swirlix has about the same kind of usage as Kartana. So by the time we get down here, or so, the usage is such nonsense that I don't even know what to make of it. Yeah, I don't even know how this is being factored exactly, because this is like hundreds of games and these are thousands of games. But it's not looking good for you to be like, oh yeah, okay, that explains why Jinx is so high as well. So these Pokemon, they're completely unviable. I think that's the main takeaway. The Pokemon in the Ubers tier are completely unviable, will never see usage in actual serious play. But they're being held captive. And there's a very easy solution to this, in my opinion. In my humble opinion, there's a very easy solution to this. Let's just make playable ban list tiers. Okay? We have the ZU tier currently. The ZU tier is not a real tier. It's just the Pokemon that fall out of P. But I can play it on the ladder. I should be able to play, make it just off to the side so it's not getting in the way of everybody else. OUBL, UUBL, RUBL, and just all the Pokemon that are in the ban lists and below get allowed. That way, if I want to play RU, but I want to be able to play with the RUBL Pokemon and below, then let's do that. Will it be a busted metagame because most of those Pokemon that now are allowed in the metagame were the ones that were busted before? Well, maybe. But if people want to have the option of being able to play with those Pokemon, then I think we should allow them to do so. And because we're not actively tiering those metagames, they're just allowable, playable ladders, but they don't actually have any bearing on the metagame, then it doesn't matter if they're busted or not. We can just allow them to exist. And I think that would be especially good for the Ubers tier, right? Because we got all those Uber Pokemon that never see usage anywhere, because there's nothing higher than them, right? All the RUBL Pokemon, no matter how unviable they are, I can still use them in UU. I can still use them in OU. That is an option. There's nothing higher than Ubers to use those Pokemon, except for technically anything goes. But again, like I've said, anything goes is a meme tier and doesn't really bring anything fun to the table. And we already saw that the Pokemon that were struggling in Ubers couldn't hack it with Uber Pokemon, so we need to bring it down to where they can play with the OU Pokemon, right? You can have Necrozma Dawn Wings and Reshiram and Deoxys Defense and Genesect, Douse, and whatever other Pokemon that would end up falling in either this generation or the next, and they can fall down to be allowed in that tier. Again, this is not a real tier, and we're not even creating an OUBL aside from Ubers. It would just exist only on the Showdown ladder that you could go in, say I want to play OUBL, and then here are the Pokemon that are available to you. I think that would not be that hard to implement, and since it doesn't require any maintenance or upkeep, you could just play it whenever you wanted, and it wouldn't be that hard to do. So I think that one is not that difficult to do, and I've been advocating for being able to play the ban lists for years, especially in Generation 7, where UUBL was ginormous. UUBL had almost as many Pokemon, if not more, than OU itself. That was absurd in Generation 7. I did not like that. I thought that UUBL in Generation 7 was big enough that it could have been its own tier, and maybe should have been its own tier, in my opinion. But you'll also notice that Mega Gardevoir and Mega Glade were both in UUBL, so that may have gone some way to explaining why I cared so passionately about that tier. Anyway, enough said about that. I want to have one little final bonus here at the end. The tiering system, as Smogon uses it, does not actually indicate how powerful a Pokemon is. A lot of times people say, oh, this is a UU Pokemon, it must be good. Well, no, it doesn't actually mean that. There are a lot of Pokemon that are role players, and they can fluctuate heavily between the tiers. In 1 month, Quagsire could be PU, and the next month, Quagsire could be OU. And I know we have changed, since Ambipom to the top and Mamoswine to the top, we have changed a bit how the quick rises and quick falls work. But the fact of the matter remains, depending on the metagame, we can have Pokemon that rise and fall very erratically. Another example maybe is like Magneton. Magneton could be UU if things in UU needed to get trapped. That would be something. Now, as it stands, things in UU don't generally get trapped by Magneton, right? Skarmory got Body Press and an Shed Shell. Celesteela has Earthquake and enough Spadef to usually tank a lot of Magneton's hits. and trapping those Pokemon isn't always, and is running more offensive sets. And Pokemon generally in UU can deal with Magneton, so it's not going to have a role there. Doesn't have a role in RU, doesn't have a role in NU. I actually think Magneton is a threat more of the analytics set, and I have used that on the channel in the past. But that's just another example of a Pokemon that would be higher tier if it had a role to play, but because it doesn't have a role to play, is down really low. And that doesn't necessarily mean Magneton is a bad Pokemon, it just means it doesn't do currently a lot in the metagame. And another one, of course, is Ditto. We see Ditto rise up to busted hyper-offensive tiers whenever those exist, and then as soon as they cease to exist, then Ditto will fall all the way back down to the bottom of the trash bin, because that's where it stays when it's not being currently used. So, I think that the tiering system, a lot of times people sort of tend to think of, oh, this Pokemon is an OU Pokemon, that means it's good, and it doesn't really necessarily mean that. I think a lot of times it's just what is in the metagame. I think that if Dragapult were for whatever reason to get banned to Ubers, then you would see Gengar jump up in usage. Probably. Well, I'm not 100% sure. But because it's a strong ghost type, it has a good speed tier, it doesn't have to worry about pursuit, it has Sludge Bomb for the fairies, it's got Trick, it's got Nasty Plot, it's got all sorts of good things going for it. But because it has to compete for a slot, now all of a sudden it's getting pushed down to not having any usage, right? That doesn't actually speak to Gengar's strength as a Pokemon, it just speaks to opportunity cost and the fact that there's a better Pokemon out there. So I do think that one of the sad byproducts of the tiering system, and there's nothing you can do about this, it's just sort of a matter of the fact that the byproduct of the way the tiering system is set up is that people get in their head that certain Pokemon are stronger or weaker because of how they fall in the tiers. But in reality, a lot of the time, it just happens to do with what is currently in the tier. Does it beat the Pokemon that are falling out of usage in the tier, right? We saw that because Skarmory is in UU and a couple other Pokemon, that Scolipede can't do anything. If those Pokemon were to rise up to OU, well, then Scolipede could be used in UU because its checks would not be gone, right? So it doesn't really speak to the power of the Pokemon, it just speaks to how the metagame has been shaped. And so to wrap this all back around, giving a few people the power to control how those metagames get shaped based off of how they perceive the metagame to be and how much they choose to implement suggestions from the community and how they shape the narrative as the community decides to suspect things is really scary at times and definitely leaves Smogon open to criticism, sometimes well-founded, sometimes less so, a lot of times less so, frankly. But when you run it that way, you're definitely leaving yourself open to criticism and to abuse of power and to inherent bias. So anyway, those are my thoughts on why I personally really dislike the way that the tiering system in Smogon currently works. Again, I'd like to reiterate that I have no problem majorly with how Smogon is ran as a whole, but I do think there are a few issues in the system that could get worked out. At this point, I don't expect anybody to be watching, but if you are, then leave me a comment and I will like it, and if there's only one of you, maybe I'll even pin it. Who knows? Alright, anyway, I'll catch you guys next time.